Some people say revenge is a dish best served cold. But when former Navy SEAL Marcus Rodriguez received that phone call at 3:47 a.m., his blood ran ice cold in a way that had nothing to do with patience and everything to do with pure, calculated fury. The voice on the other end was barely a whisper, broken and trembling. Marcus said they tried to. The line went dead. 23 years of military training kicked in instantly. Marcus had survived 3 tours in Afghanistan, countless covert operations, and situations that would break most men. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for hearing his younger sister Elena's voice shattered like glass. Within 6 hours, Marcus would be on a plane. Within 48 hours, he would uncover a web of corruption, violence, and cover-ups that reached deeper than anyone imagined. And within 1 week, the men who thought they could destroy an innocent woman's life would learn a truth as old as warfare itself. You never, ever mess with a SEAL's family. This is the true story of how one phone call set in motion a chain of events that would expose a criminal organization, bring justice to the forgotten, and remind everyone involved exactly who Marcus Rodriguez really was beneath the civilian clothes he'd been wearing for the past 2 years. Some battles end when you leave the service. Others are just beginning. What follows is the complete account of 7 days that changed everything, told through witness testimonies, police records, medical reports, and Marcus's own detailed journal entries that he kept throughout the ordeal. Names and some locations have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved, but every event described here actually happened. Marcus Rodriguez had been dreaming about the mountains of Afghanistan again when his phone shattered the silence of his small apartment in Denver. The digital clock beside his bed glowed an angry red. 3:47 a.m. In his 2 years since leaving the Navy SEALs, Marcus had learned to sleep through most sounds, traffic, sirens, even the occasional gunshot that echoed through his neighborhood. But the phone was different. The phone meant someone needed him. He answered without looking at the caller ID, his voice automatically shifting into the calm, controlled tone that had served him well during countless night operations. Rodriguez. The silence that followed lasted 3 heartbeats. Then came a voice that changed everything. Marcus. It was Elena, his younger sister, but not the Elena he knew. This voice was broken, hollow, like someone had reached inside her chest and crushed something vital. Marcus saw that. The line went dead. Marcus was already moving. 23 years of military training don't just disappear because you hang up your uniform. He speed-dialed Elena's number while pulling on clothes with his free hand. Straight to voicemail. He tried again. Still voicemail. On the 3rd attempt, his hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the kind of controlled rage that had once made him one of the most effective operators in his unit. Elena lived in Phoenix, Arizona, nearly 900 miles away. She worked as a nurse at Phoenix General Hospital, loved hiking in the desert, and called Marcus every Sunday without fail to check on him. She worried that he wasn't adjusting well to civilian life, worried that he spent too much time alone, worried that he was drinking too much. Elena had always been the worrier in the family, even as kids growing up in East Los Angeles. She worried about everyone except herself. Marcus grabbed his laptop and started tracking Elena's phone using an app they'd installed for emergencies. The GPS showed her location as Mercy General Hospital, not where she worked, but across town. His blood pressure spiked. Elena would never go to a different hospital unless something was seriously wrong. The flight from Denver to Phoenix didn't leave until 6:30 a.m. Marcus spent the 3 hours until departure making calls and gathering information with the methodical precision that had kept him alive in hostile territory. He called the hospital, identifying himself as Elena's emergency contact and military brother. The nurse who answered was hesitant to give details over the phone, but Marcus could hear something in her voice, pity, maybe fear. "Sir, your sister was brought in around midnight. She's stable, but you should get here as soon as possible." "What happened to her?" Another pause. "The police are involved, sir. I think it's better if you speak with them when you arrive." The flight to Phoenix was the longest 2 hours and 15 minutes of Marcus's life. He'd once spent 18 hours pinned down by enemy fire in a bombed-out building in Kandahar, but this felt worse. At least in Afghanistan, he could shoot back. Here, strapped into an airplane seat, he could only think and plan and fight the urge to tear something apart with his bare hands. Marcus used the flight time to dig deeper into Elena's recent life. They talked regularly, but he realized he'd been so focused on his own struggles with civilian life that he'd missed signs that something might be wrong. Over the past month, Elena's usual cheerful Sunday calls had been shorter, more subdued. When he'd asked about work, she'd changed the subject. When he'd suggested visiting, she'd made excuses about being too busy. He pulled up her social media accounts on his phone. Elena wasn't a heavy poster, but her last few updates told a story. 3 weeks ago, she'd shared an article about workplace harassment in hospitals. 2 weeks ago, she posted a quote about standing up for what's right even when you're standing alone. Her last post, from 5 days ago, was just 3 words: truth will win. The plane touched down at Sky Harbor Airport at 8:52 a.m. Marcus had one carry-on bag and a single-minded determination to get to his sister. He'd rented a car in advance, and 25 minutes later, he was pulling into the parking lot of Mercy General Hospital. Mercy General was one of Phoenix's older hospitals, a sprawling complex of interconnected buildings that had grown organically over decades. Marcus had memorized the layout during the flight and headed straight for the emergency department. The automatic doors slid open with a pneumatic hiss, and he was immediately hit by that distinctive hospital smell, antiseptic mixed with fear and human suffering. The nurse at the information desk looked up as he approached. She was middle-aged with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her name tag read Carol. "I'm looking for Elena Rodriguez," Marcus said, showing his military ID out of habit before remembering to pull out his civilian license. "I'm her brother." Carol's expression softened. "Room 314. Take the elevator to the 3rd floor and turn left." "But, sir," she hesitated. "There are police officers with her. They've been waiting for family to arrive." Marcus thanked her and headed for the elevator. As the doors closed and the car began its slow climb, he caught his reflection in the polished metal. 2 years out of the military, but everything about his posture and expression still screamed Special Forces. Maybe that was good. Maybe whoever had hurt Elena needed to see exactly what kind of man they were dealing with. The 3rd floor was quieter than the emergency department. Marcus found room 314 halfway down a sterile corridor lined with identical doors. 2 police officers stood outside, a man and a woman, both in their 30s, both wearing the carefully neutral expressions that cops develop when dealing with bad situations. The male officer, whose nameplate read Detective Morrison, looked up as Marcus approached. "Are you Elena Rodriguez's family?" "Marcus Rodriguez, her brother." Marcus showed his ID again. "What happened to my sister?" Detective Morrison exchanged a glance with his partner before answering. "Mr. Rodriguez, your sister was the victim of an assault last night. She's physically stable, but..." Another pause. "Maybe we should talk privately first. I want to see her." "Of course, but there's some things you should know. Your sister has been through a significant trauma. She's been in and out of consciousness since she arrived, and when she is awake, she's been asking for you." The female detective, Officer Sarah Chun, according to her nameplate, stepped forward. "Mr. Rodriguez, we understand you served in the military?" "Navy SEALs. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq." "What? Your sister mentioned that you taught her some self-defense moves. That training may have saved her life last night." Marcus felt ice forming in his stomach. What exactly happened? Detective Morrison glanced around the hallway, then gestured toward a small family consultation room across from Elena's room. "Let's sit down for this." The consultation room was designed to deliver bad news. Soft lighting, comfortable chairs arranged in a circle, a box of tissues strategically placed on a small table. Marcus had been in similar rooms before, usually when military families received word about their loved ones. He'd never expected to be on the receiving end. "Your sister left work around 11 p.m. last night," Detective Morrison began, consulting a small notebook. "She was walking to her car in the hospital parking garage when she was approached by 3 men. According to her statement, they seemed to know her schedule, knew where she parked. This was planned. It appears so. The men attempted to force her into a van. Your sister fought back, and during the struggle, one of the attackers tried to strangle her. She managed to break free using what she described as moves my brother taught me, but not before sustaining significant injuries." Officer Chin leaned forward. "Mr. Rodriguez, your sister believes this attack was related to something she discovered at her workplace. She's been trying to report concerns about patient care and possible fraud, but she felt like nobody was taking her seriously." Marcus processed this information with the same methodical approach he'd once used to analyze enemy positions. You're telling me someone tried to kill my sister to cover up hospital corruption? We're still investigating, Detective Morrison said carefully. But, yes, that appears to be the case. Your sister managed to get photos and documentation of what she believes are serious violations. She'd been preparing to take her concerns to federal authorities when this happened. The ice in Marcus's stomach was spreading. Elena had always been the one family member who couldn't ignore injustice, who couldn't look the other way when something was wrong. As a kid, she'd gotten in trouble at school for defending smaller children from bullies. As a teenager, she'd organized protests against unfair school policies. And now, as an adult, she'd apparently stumbled onto something big enough that people were willing to commit murder to keep it quiet. I want to see her now, Marcus said, standing. The detectives led him across the hall to room 314. Marcus's first glimpse of his sister hit him like a physical blow. Elena lay in a hospital bed, looking smaller and more fragile than he'd ever seen her. Bruises covered her neck in a pattern that clearly showed where hands had gripped her throat. Her left arm was in a sling, and there were bandages covering cuts on her face and hands. But her eyes were open, and when she saw Marcus, she tried to smile. "Hey, big brother," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the damage to her throat. "I knew you'd come." Marcus pulled a chair close to her bed and took her uninjured hand in both of his. "I'm here, Elena. I'm not going anywhere. They tried to kill me, Marcus. They actually tried to kill me." Tears started flowing down her cheeks. "I just wanted to do the right thing. Patients were being hurt, and nobody would listen. Tell me everything," Marcus said softly. From the beginning, Elena's story came out in pieces, interrupted by pain medication and the trauma of reliving the attack. Over the past 3 months, she'd noticed irregularities in the cardiac unit where she worked. Patients were receiving unnecessary procedures, medications were being diverted, and when she tried to report these concerns through proper channels, she'd been told to mind her own business. She'd started documenting everything, taking photos of medication logs, copying patient files that showed suspicious patterns, recording conversations with administrators who dismissed her concerns. 3 weeks ago, she'd discovered that the corruption went deeper than she'd initially thought. It wasn't just a few bad actors. It was an organized system involving doctors, administrators, and outside contractors. "I was going to take everything to the FBI," Elena whispered. "I had a meeting scheduled for this morning. Someone must have found out." Marcus listened to every word, filing away names, dates, and details with the same precision he'd once used to plan military operations. Dr. Harrison Webb, the chief of cardiology who'd been performing unnecessary procedures. Janet Palmer, the nursing supervisor who'd been altering medication records. David Chun, a hospital administrator who'd been threatening Elena's job. And behind them all, a medical supply company called Phoenix Healthcare Solutions that seemed to be at the center of everything. "Where's the evidence?" Marcus asked. Elena managed another weak smile. "Safety deposit box at First National Bank." "I'm not stupid, Marcus. I know how these things work." After an hour, the pain medication pulled Elena back into sleep. Marcus sat beside her bed for another hour, watching her breathe and thinking. The doctors said she'd recover physically, but the psychological trauma would take longer to heal. Someone had tried to murder his sister, and the only reason she was alive was because he'd taught her how to break a chokehold during one of his leave visits home. Detective Morrison appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Rodriguez, we need to discuss security arrangements. Given the nature of this case, we're concerned about your sister's safety while she recovers." Marcus looked up from Elena's sleeping form. "What kind of security can you provide?" "Hospital security has been increased, and we can have officers check on her regularly. But our resources are limited." "That's not going to be enough," Marcus said quietly. "These people tried to kill her once. They'll try again." "Sir, we understand your concerns, but..." Marcus stood and followed the detective out into the hallway. "Detective Morrison, I spent 8 years hunting people who thought they were untouchable. I've seen what happens when criminals think they've eliminated the only witness to their crimes. They don't just give up and hope for the best." Officer Chen joined them in the hallway. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm telling you that I'll be providing security for my sister until this is resolved. I'll be staying in Phoenix, and I'll be conducting my own investigation into what happened." Detective Morrison frowned. "Mr. Rodriguez, we appreciate your concern, but this is a police matter. We can't have civilians conducting their own investigations." Marcus met the detective's eyes with the steady gaze that had once made enemy combatants reconsider their life choices. "Detective, with all due respect, my sister called me for help, not you. She's alive because I taught her skills that your protection couldn't provide. And the people who tried to kill her are still out there, probably planning their next move while we're having this conversation." "Sir, we strongly advise against." "I'm not asking for permission," Marcus said calmly. "I'm informing you of my plans as a courtesy. Elena is my family, and I protect my family." The detectives exchanged glances. Officer Chun spoke first. "If you discover anything relevant to our investigation, you'll share it with us?" "Absolutely. This isn't about revenge, it's about justice. But it's also about keeping my sister alive long enough to see that justice done." Detective Morrison handed Marcus a business card. "Stay in touch. And Mr. Rodriguez, be careful. If your sister is right about the scope of this corruption, these people have resources and connections we're still trying to understand." After the police left, Marcus returned to Elena's room and settled into the chair beside her bed. He had calls to make and plans to develop, but for now, he simply watched his sister sleep and let his mind work through the tactical situation. Someone had tried to kill Elena to protect a criminal conspiracy. That same someone now knew that she'd survived and would likely testify. They'd also discovered that Elena had a brother with specialized military training who was now very, very interested in their activities. Marcus pulled out his phone and started making calls. First to his former unit commander, who could provide contacts in federal law enforcement. Then to his old teammates who lived within driving distance of Phoenix. Finally, to a private investigator he'd worked with during his transition to civilian life. Elena stirred in her sleep and mumbled something incoherent. Marcus reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "It's okay, little sister," he whispered. "Big brother's here now, and I'm going to make sure these people remember exactly who they're dealing with." Outside Elena's hospital room window, Phoenix sprawled under the desert sun, a city of 5 million people going about their daily lives unaware that a war was about to begin. It would be a different kind of war than Marcus had fought in Afghanistan. No uniforms, no clear battle lines, no rules of engagement. But it would be a war nonetheless, and Marcus Rodriguez had never lost a war that mattered. The people who had tried to kill his sister were about to learn why Navy SEALs had a reputation for never giving up and never leaving anyone behind. Elena was family, and Marcus was about to remind everyone involved what that meant. The Phoenix sun was already blazing at 8 a.m. when Marcus left Elena's hospital room the next morning. He'd spent the night in the chair beside her bed, dozing fitfully and waking every few minutes to check on her breathing. Elena had slept better than expected, probably thanks to the pain medication, but Marcus knew the real trauma would hit when the drugs wore off, and she had to face what had happened to her. Before leaving the hospital, Marcus had a conversation with Dr. Sarah Martinez, Elena's attending physician. Dr. Martinez was a small woman in her 40s with intelligent dark eyes, and the kind of calm demeanor that probably served her well in emergency situations. "Your sister is remarkably strong," Dr. Martinez told Marcus in the hallway outside Elena's room. "Physically, she'll recover completely. The bruising around her neck looks worse than it is. There was no permanent damage to her windpipe. The cuts and bruises will heal within a couple of weeks." "What about psychologically?" Dr. Martinez's expression grew more serious. "That's harder to predict. She's been through a significant trauma, and she's dealing with the knowledge that people she trusted may have betrayed her. I recommended counseling, but honestly, having family support is probably the most important factor in her recovery." Marcus nodded. "She'll have that. How long before she can be discharged?" "If everything continues to improve, probably tomorrow." "But Mr. Rodriguez." Dr. Martinez hesitated. Elena mentioned that she thinks the attack was related to problems at her workplace. "As a medical professional, I have to say that the idea of hospital staff being involved in something like this is deeply disturbing." "Have you ever heard of problems at Phoenix General Hospital?" "Not directly, but the medical community in Phoenix isn't that large. There have been rumors about unusual patient outcomes in their cardiac unit, higher than normal rates of certain procedures. Nothing concrete enough to warrant investigation, but enough to make people talk." Marcus filed this information away. "If Elena asks, tell her I'll be back this afternoon. I have some errands to run." Marcus's first stop was the First National Bank downtown, where Elena kept her safety deposit box. She'd given him her key and written permission to access the box, though the bank manager still required significant verification before allowing access. Marcus didn't mind the bureaucracy. It meant Elena's evidence was well protected. The safety deposit box contained more than Marcus had expected. Elena had been thorough in her investigation, documenting everything with a kind of methodical approach that would have impressed his old intelligence officers. There were photographs of medication logs showing discrepancies between what was ordered and what was dispensed. Copies of patient files showing unnecessary cardiac procedures performed by Dr. Harrison Webb. Financial record Elena had somehow accessed showing unusual patterns of billing and insurance claims. But the most damning evidence was a series of recorded conversations Elena had made using her phone. Marcus listened to them using earbuds in the bank's private viewing room, and what he heard made his blood run cold. The first recording was a conversation between Dr. Webb and Janet Palmer, the nursing supervisor. They discussed moving product and maintaining quota levels while reviewing a list of upcoming surgeries. It became clear they were talking about unnecessary procedures that would allow them to use specific medical devices and medications, products supplied by Phoenix Healthcare Solutions. The second recording was even more disturbing. Elena had recorded a conversation with David Chun, the hospital administrator, where he explicitly threatened her job if she continued asking questions about patient care irregularities. Chun mentioned that Elena was becoming a problem and that problems needed to be solved. The third recording was the most recent, from just 4 days ago. Elena had somehow recorded a meeting between Dr. Webb and someone identified only as Mr. Thompson from Phoenix Healthcare Solutions. Thompson spoke with a slight accent that Marcus couldn't identify, but his message was clear. The operation was too profitable to risk exposure, and any threats needed to be handled definitively. Marcus made copies of everything and returned the originals to the safety deposit box. This evidence was explosive enough to bring down not just the individuals involved, but potentially expose a much larger network of medical fraud. Elena had stumbled onto something big enough that people were willing to commit murder to protect it. His next stop was Phoenix General Hospital. Marcus wanted to see the place where his sister worked, get a feel for the layout and the people involved. He parked in the visitor lot and spent an hour walking through the public areas, observing security procedures and identifying potential vulnerabilities. Phoenix General was a large regional medical center with multiple buildings connected by covered walkways. The parking garage where Elena had been attacked was typical of hospital design. Multiple levels, poor lighting, numerous blind spots where someone could wait without being seen. Marcus noted the locations of security cameras and realized there were significant gaps in coverage, particularly around the stairwells and elevator areas. He made his way to the cardiac unit on the 7th floor, where Elena worked as a nurse. The unit was busy with the usual hospital activity, doctors making rounds, nurses checking on patients, families visiting loved ones. Marcus introduced himself to the charge nurse as Elena's brother and asked if he could speak with any of Elena's colleagues about the attack. The charge nurse, a woman named Lisa who appeared to be in her 50s, looked genuinely upset when she spoke about Elena. "She's one of our best nurses," Lisa said. "Patients love her, and she really cares about doing things right. That's why this whole situation is so awful." "What situation?" Marcus asked carefully. Lisa glanced around to make sure they weren't being overheard. Elena had been raising concerns about some of the procedures being done here. She thought patients were getting unnecessary treatments, and she was asking questions about medication usage. Some people didn't appreciate her attention to detail. "What kind of people?" "Dr. Webb, mainly, and Janet Palmer from administration. They both seemed to think Elena was being disruptive, questioning their professional judgment. There'd been some tension lately." Marcus thanked Lisa and asked if he could speak with any other nurses who worked with Elena. Over the next hour, he had conversations with 3 different staff members, and a picture began to emerge. Elena had been increasingly isolated over the past few months as she'd raised concerns about patient care. Several nurses admitted they'd noticed irregularities, but had been afraid to speak up after seeing how Elena was treated for asking questions. One nurse, a young man named Kevin, was particularly helpful. Elena was building some kind of documentation, he whispered during their conversation in a supply closet. She'd been taking photos and asking me to witness certain things. I think she was planning to take her concerns outside the hospital. Did anyone else know about her documentation? Kevin nodded grimly. Janet Palmer caught Elena photographing medication logs about 2 weeks ago. There was a big confrontation, and Elena was told she could be fired for violating patient privacy policies. But Elena said she was documenting medication discrepancies, not patient information. Marcus asked Kevin about Dr. Webb and learned that the cardiac surgeon had been performing an unusually high number of procedures over the past year. Way more than normal, Kevin explained. Patients who came in for basic checkups would end up needing immediate surgery. Some of the other doctors started making jokes about Dr. Webb's magic touch for finding problems. After leaving the hospital, Marcus drove to the offices of Phoenix Healthcare Solutions. The company was located in a modern office complex on the outskirts of Phoenix, surrounded by similar businesses and medical facilities. Marcus didn't go inside. That would come later, but he spent time observing the building layout, security measures, and employee patterns. Phoenix Healthcare Solutions appeared to be a legitimate medical supply company, at least on the surface. Their website listed them as specialists in cardiac surgery equipment and medications. The company had been in business for 3 years and claimed to serve hospitals throughout the Southwest. But Marcus's investigative instincts, honed through years of military intelligence work, told him there was more to the company than met the eye. The building was larger than necessary for a simple supply company, and the security measures seemed excessive for a business dealing in medical equipment. There were too many cameras, too many locked doors, and too many people in suits who didn't look like medical supply salespeople. Marcus spent the afternoon at a coffee shop across the street from Phoenix Healthcare Solutions, watching employee patterns and making notes. Around 4 p.m., he observed something interesting. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled into the company's parking lot, and 3 men got out. One of them was tall and thin with graying hair, possibly the Mr. Thompson from Elena's recording. The other 2 were younger, heavily built, and moved with the kind of alert awareness that suggested security or military backgrounds. Marcus took photos with his phone and made note of the SUV's license plate. Then he made a phone call to his old teammate Jake Morrison, who now worked as a private investigator in Los Angeles. "Jake, it's Marcus. I need some background checks run on some people and a company." Jake's voice carried the easy familiarity of someone who'd shared foxholes and life-or-death situations. "Marcus, good to hear from you, man. What kind of trouble are you in?" Marcus explained the situation with Elena, keeping the details factual and concise. Jake listened without interruption, asking only a few clarifying questions. "Jesus, Marcus, your sister really stepped in it, didn't she? How can I help?" Marcus gave Jake the names and information he'd gathered: Dr. Harrison Webb, Janet Palmer, David Chun, and Phoenix Healthcare Solutions. He also provided the license plate number from the black SUV. "I need to know who these people really are," Marcus said. "Financial backgrounds, criminal histories, business connections, anything that might explain why they'd be willing to kill to protect their operation." "Give me 24 hours, Jake said. "I'll call in some favors and run everything through my contacts. You watch your back, Marcus. If these people try to kill your sister once, they won't hesitate to try again if they see you as a threat." Marcus's next call was to his former commanding officer, Captain Jim Bradley, who was now working at the Pentagon. Bradley had been Marcus's mentor throughout his SEAL career and had maintained contact after Marcus's discharge. "Captain, it's Rodriguez. I need some advice about a situation here in Phoenix." Bradley listened to Marcus's explanation with the same careful attention he'd once given to mission briefings. When Marcus finished, there was a long pause. "Son, you're describing what sounds like a significant criminal conspiracy with potential federal implications. Have you considered letting the FBI handle this? The local police are investigating, but I don't think they understand the scope of what they're dealing with. These people have resources and connections. They may have people inside the hospital, maybe inside law enforcement too. What do you need from me? Contacts at the federal level. People who can take Elena's evidence seriously and provide protection for her while the investigation proceeds." Bradley was quiet for a moment. "I can make some calls. There's an FBI field office in Phoenix, and I know the special agent in charge there. Good man, former Marine. But, Marcus, you need to be careful about how you handle this. I know you want to protect your sister, but don't let this turn into a one-man war." "Understood, Captain. But these people made it personal when they put their hands on Elena." "I know. Just remember your training. Good intelligence wins battles, not blind aggression. Let me make those calls and get back to you." Marcus's final stop of the day was to rent a furnished apartment near the hospital. He'd been staying at a hotel, but if he was going to be in Phoenix for an extended period, he needed a more stable base of operations. The apartment complex was secure, had good sight lines to the surrounding area, and was only 10 minutes from the hospital. While setting up his temporary command post, Marcus reviewed everything he'd learned during his first day of investigation. Elena had uncovered a medical fraud scheme involving unnecessary procedures and medication diversion. The scheme appeared to be organized and profitable enough that the conspirators were willing to commit murder to protect it. The key players were Dr. Webb, Janet Palmer, David Chun, and unknown individuals associated with Phoenix Healthcare Solutions. But Marcus sensed there were layers to this operation he hadn't discovered yet. The security measures at Phoenix Healthcare Solutions, the professional quality of the attack on Elena, and the sophistication of the cover-up all suggested involvement by people with serious resources and experience. Marcus opened his laptop and began creating detailed files on each person involved in the conspiracy. He learned during his military career that good intelligence was the foundation of any successful operation. He needed to understand his enemies before he could defeat them. By evening, he compiled comprehensive profiles based on public records, social media, and professional databases. Dr. Harrison Webb was a successful cardiac surgeon with an expensive lifestyle that seemed to exceed his legitimate income. Janet Palmer had worked at Phoenix General for 8 years and had access to medication storage and inventory systems. David Chun was a hospital administrator with a business degree and connections throughout Phoenix's medical community. The more interesting discovery came when Marcus researched Phoenix Healthcare Solutions. The company had been incorporated 3 years ago with minimal capital investment, but had quickly become one of the largest medical suppliers in the Southwest. Their growth rate was remarkable, almost suspicious. More troubling, the company's incorporation papers listed an address that turned out to be a mail drop, and the listed officers of the corporation were difficult to verify through normal channels. Marcus was still researching when his phone rang. It was Jake Morrison calling with preliminary results from his background checks. "Marcus, I've got some interesting information for you. Dr. Harrison Webb is broke. I mean seriously in debt. Gambling problems, expensive divorce, bad investments. Guy should be making serious money as a heart surgeon, but he's leveraged to the hilt. What about the others? Janet Palmer has been clean most of her career, but she's been making some interesting financial moves lately. Paid off her mortgage 6 months ago, bought a new car, took a vacation to Europe, all on a nurse supervisor salary. David Chun, that's where it gets interesting. Chen's background shows some gaps that don't add up. He claims to have an MBA from Arizona State, but the university has no record of him. His previous employment history has some holes too. And get this, his social security number wasn't issued until he was 28 years old. Marcus felt the familiar tingle of recognition that came when pieces of a puzzle started falling into place. Sounds like someone with a constructed identity. That's what I'm thinking. And about Phoenix Healthcare Solutions. The company is registered as a subsidiary of a larger corporation based in the Cayman Islands. Shell companies all the way down. Whoever's running this operation knows how to hide money and identities. What about the license plate? Black SUV is registered to a security company called Desert Protection Services. Guess who owns Desert Protection Services? A subsidiary of the same Cayman Islands corporation that owns Phoenix Healthcare Solutions. Marcus absorbed this information while staring at the wall map of Phoenix he'd purchased that afternoon. Red pins marked the locations of the hospital, Phoenix Healthcare Solutions, and the apartment complex where Elena lived. Yellow pins showed the locations where the attack had occurred and where Elena was now recovering. Jake, I need you to dig deeper into Desert Protection Services. I want to know who they employ, what kind of services they provide, and whether they have any connections to organized crime. Already on it. But Marcus, be very careful. This is starting to look like something much bigger than hospital fraud. If these people have their own security company, they have resources and capabilities that could be dangerous. After ending the call with Jake, Marcus sat in his sparse apartment and reviewed the tactical situation. Elena had discovered a criminal conspiracy that involved medical fraud, money laundering through shell companies, and apparently professional security operatives willing to commit murder. The attack on Elena hadn't been a spontaneous attempt to silence her. It had been planned and executed by people with experience in violence. Marcus made a list of immediate priorities. First, ensure Elena's continued safety while she recovered. Second, gather enough evidence to present a compelling case to federal authorities. Third, identify all the players in the conspiracy before they had a chance to disappear or destroy evidence. But underlying all these tactical considerations was a deeper, more personal motivation. Someone had tried to kill his sister, and they'd done it in a way designed to send a message that Elena was powerless, that her concerns didn't matter, that she could be eliminated without consequences. These people had made a fundamental error in judgment. They'd assumed Elena was isolated and vulnerable. They hadn't factored in the possibility that she had a brother who'd spent 8 years learning how to find people who didn't want to be found and convince them to change their behavior. Marcus checked his weapons. His civilian concealed carry permit was valid in Arizona, and he'd brought his service pistol and backup weapon from Denver. Tomorrow he'd begin more aggressive intelligence gathering, starting with surveillance of Phoenix Healthcare Solutions and research into desert protection services. As he settled in for the night, Marcus thought about Elena sleeping in her hospital bed 10 minutes away. She called him for help, and he'd responded the way any big brother should. But what Elena didn't know yet was that her big brother had spent 8 years in the world's most elite military unit, learning skills that most people couldn't imagine. The people who tried to kill Elena thought they were dealing with an ordinary civilian, probably someone who could be intimidated or eliminated if necessary. Tomorrow, Marcus would begin teaching them exactly how wrong they were. Outside his apartment window, Phoenix sprawled under the desert stars, millions of lights marking millions of lives going on as normal. But for Marcus Rodriguez, normal had ended with a phone call at 3:47 a.m. Now there was only the mission: protect Elena, find the truth, and make sure the people responsible understood the consequences of their actions. Marcus had never failed a mission that mattered. He wasn't about to start now. Marcus was watching Phoenix Healthcare Solutions from his surveillance position across the street when he realized he was being watched too. It was 10:30 a.m. on his third day in Phoenix, and he'd been conducting systematic reconnaissance of the company's operations when his peripheral vision caught the telltale signs of counter-surveillance. A man in a gray sedan had been parked at the end of the block for too long, occasionally lifting binoculars to his eyes while pretending to read a newspaper. Another man was walking past the coffee shop where Marcus sat for the third time in 20 minutes, each time glancing through the window at Marcus's table. These weren't federal agents or local police. Their techniques were too obvious, their coordination too sloppy. Marcus sipped his coffee and continued watching Phoenix Healthcare Solutions while mentally cataloging the surveillance team. 2 men in the sedan, 1 on foot patrol, probably at least 1 more position where Marcus couldn't see them. Amateur hour, but amateur hour with intent to harm could still be dangerous. The past 48 hours had been productive. Elena was recovering well and would be discharged from the hospital that afternoon. Jake Morrison had provided additional intelligence on the key players in the conspiracy. And, most importantly, Marcus had managed to get inside Phoenix Healthcare Solutions. The infiltration had been easier than expected. Marcus had posed as a representative from a medical equipment leasing company, using fake business cards and credentials that Jake had provided through his private investigator contacts. The receptionist, a young woman who seemed genuinely unaware of any criminal activity, had given Marcus a tour of the facility while he waited to meet with a sales manager. What Marcus saw during that tour confirmed his suspicions about Phoenix Healthcare Solutions. The building was much larger than necessary for a simple medical supply company, with several areas marked as restricted access and security measures that included key card entry systems, surveillance cameras, and what appeared to be soundproofing in certain rooms. Most telling was the warehouse area, where Marcus observed inventory that didn't match the company's stated business model. Along with legitimate medical supplies, he'd seen boxes labeled with pharmaceutical company logos, but no visible FDA approval markings. There were also crates marked only with numbers and letters that meant nothing to him, but suggested a coding system designed to obscure contents. Marcus had managed to plant 2 small surveillance devices during his visit, one in the main reception area and another near what appeared to be a conference room. The devices were military-grade equipment he'd purchased through contacts in the private security industry, capable of transmitting audio and basic video for up to 72 hours. But now, as he sat in the coffee shop reviewing intelligence and planning his next moves, it was clear that Phoenix Healthcare Solutions had detected his interest. The surveillance team watching him was probably from Desert Protection Services, the security company that Jake's research had connected to the larger conspiracy. Marcus finished his coffee and left the shop, moving with the casual pace of someone running errands rather than someone who detected hostile surveillance. He walked 3 blocks to where he'd parked his rental car, using storefront windows and reflective surfaces to monitor the team following him. The foot surveillance man stayed with him while the sedan moved parallel on surrounding streets. Marcus had to admit they were persistent, even if they weren't particularly skilled. He led them on a meandering route through central Phoenix, ostensibly running errands, but actually testing their capabilities and commitment. After an hour of mobile surveillance, Marcus was satisfied that he understood their methods and limitations. The team was thorough but predictable, professional enough to maintain contact, but not sophisticated enough to remain undetected by someone with his training. More importantly, they seemed to be conducting surveillance rather than planning an immediate attack. Marcus drove to the hospital to pick up Elena, taking a route designed to lose his surveillance team in the complex traffic patterns around Phoenix's medical district. By the time he reached the hospital parking garage, he was confident he'd broken contact. Elena was waiting in her room, dressed in street clothes and looking remarkably better than she had 3 days ago. The bruises on her neck were still visible but fading, and her arm was out of the sling. More importantly, the lost, frightened expression she'd worn after the attack had been replaced by something that looked more like the determined sister Marcus remembered. "Ready to get out of here?" Marcus asked, carrying her small bag of personal items. "More than ready," Elena replied. "This place makes me nervous now. Too many people who might be connected to what happened." Marcus had already considered the security implications of Elena's discharge. The apartment he'd rented had only one entrance, poor sight lines, and neighbors who might be endangered if violence occurred. Instead, he'd booked them into a suite at a high-end resort on the outskirts of Phoenix, a place with good security, multiple exit routes, and staff trained to notice unusual activity. As they drove through Phoenix traffic, Elena filled Marcus in on conversations she'd had with other nurses from Phoenix General who'd visited her in the hospital. "Kevin came by yesterday evening," Elena said. "He's really scared, Marcus. He said Janet Palmer has been asking questions about who I've been talking to, what kind of documentation I might have collected. Kevin thinks they're trying to figure out how much evidence I'd gathered." "Did Kevin give them any information?" "No, but he's afraid he might lose his job just for being associated with me. And Lisa, the charge nurse, told me that Dr. Webb has been asking about my family background, specifically about whether I have any relatives in law enforcement or the military." Marcus absorbed this information while navigating traffic. They're conducting their own intelligence gathering, trying to understand what kind of threat they're facing. Elena was quiet for a moment. "Marcus, what exactly did you do in the military? I know you were a Navy SEAL, but you've never talked much about the details." Marcus had been expecting this conversation. "My team specialized in direct action operations. We went places where bad people thought they were safe and reminded them that they weren't." "Are you planning to do that here?" "I'm planning to gather enough evidence to put these people in prison and make sure you're safe while that happens. But, Elena, I need you to understand something. These people aren't just hospital administrators making bad decisions. This is an organized criminal operation with resources and people trained in violence. They tried to kill you once, and they'll try again if they think you're still a threat." Elena nodded slowly. "I've been thinking about that. In the hospital, I had time to really process what happened. Those men knew my schedule, knew where I parked, knew I'd be alone. This wasn't random. No, it wasn't. And that means they're probably watching the hospital, watching your apartment, maybe watching anyone you've had contact with recently." As if to emphasize his point, Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from the surveillance devices he'd planted at Phoenix Healthcare Solutions. The equipment was programmed to send alerts when it detected voices or movement in the areas he'd targeted. Marcus pulled into a shopping center parking lot and checked the message. The audio surveillance had picked up a conversation in the Phoenix Healthcare Solutions conference room. He put the phone on speaker so Elena could hear the recording. The voices were partially obscured by background noise, but Marcus could make out key phrases. Someone was discussing the Rodriguez problem and whether the sister had shared information with the brother. Another voice, possibly the man Elena had identified as David Shun, mentioned that the military guy was asking too many questions and needed to be neutralized. Elena went pale as she listened to the recording. "Marcus, they're talking about killing you too." "Good," Marcus said grimly. "That means they see me as a threat to their operation." How was that good? Marcus looked at his sister with a calm expression that had once reassured teammates before dangerous missions. Because it means they're scared. Scared people make mistakes, and mistakes give us opportunities. His phone rang with a call from Jake Morrison. Marcus answered immediately. Marcus, I've got urgent information for you, Jake said without preamble. Desert Protection Services has some very interesting employees. 3 of them have backgrounds in military special operations. 2 others have connections to organized crime families in Las Vegas and Los Angeles. What kind of connections? The kind that suggest this medical fraud operation is connected to a larger criminal enterprise. I think Phoenix Healthcare Solutions is a front for money laundering, and the medical fraud is just one revenue stream. Marcus processed this information while watching traffic flow around the shopping center. What else? I traced some of the financial connections. Phoenix Healthcare Solutions has been moving money through a network of shell companies that eventually connects to businesses in Nevada, California, and Mexico. We're talking about millions of dollars. Marcus, this isn't just hospital corruption. This is serious organized crime. Elena listened to the conversation with growing alarm. Marcus, maybe we should just take what we have for the FBI and let them handle it. Marcus was about to respond when he noticed a familiar black SUV entering the shopping center parking lot. The same vehicle he'd observed at Phoenix Healthcare Solutions, moving slowly as if the occupants were searching for something. Jake, I'll call you back, Marcus said, ending the call. Elena, we need to move. Now. Marcus started the car and pulled out of the parking space, heading for the shopping center's rear exit. In his rearview mirror, he could see the black SUV changing direction to follow them. Are those the people who attacked me? Elena asked, her voice tight with fear. Possibly. Either way, they're not here to have a friendly conversation. Marcus drove through the shopping center service area, using delivery trucks and loading docks for concealment while he planned his next move. The black SUV was still following, maintaining distance, but clearly tracking their movement. As they reached the rear exit of the shopping center, Marcus made a tactical decision that would change everything that followed. Instead of fleeing, he pulled into an empty parking space behind a large electronics store and turned off the engine. Marcus, what are you doing? Something they won't expect, Marcus replied, checking his concealed carry weapon. Elena, I need you to stay in the car, keep your head down, and be ready to call 911 if things go badly. You're not going out there. Marcus looked at his sister with the expression she remembered from childhood, when he decided to confront bullies who were bothering her at school. Elena, these people try to murder you. They're planning to murder me. And right now they think they have the advantage because they know where we are and we're running from them. So it's time to change the dynamic. I'm going to have a conversation with them about their behavior and their future plans. Marcus got out of the car and walked to a position behind a concrete pillar that provided cover, but allowed him to observe the area where the black SUV would have to approach. He didn't have to wait long. The SUV entered the rear parking area slowly, its occupants clearly searching for Marcus's rental car. When they spotted it, the vehicle stopped about 50 feet away. 2 men got out, both large, both moving with the kind of alert awareness that confirmed Jake's intelligence about military backgrounds. Marcus recognized one of them from his surveillance of Phoenix Healthcare Solutions. The man was tall and lean with graying hair, probably in his 50s, carrying himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to intimidating people through presence alone. The second man was younger, heavily built, and had the kind of facial scars that suggested experience with violence. Both men were dressed casually, but bulged slightly under their jackets in places that indicated concealed weapons. Marcus waited until both men were committed to approaching his rental car before he stepped out from behind the concrete pillar. Gentlemen, he called out in a conversational tone, I think you're looking for me. Both men spun toward his voice, hands instinctively moving toward their weapons before stopping as they realized Marcus was standing in the open with his hands visible and relaxed. The older man recovered first. Mr. Rodriguez, I presume? That's right. And you are? Someone who thinks you and your sister have been asking the wrong kinds of questions. Marcus smiled with the kind of calm friendliness that had once made enemy prisoners very nervous about their immediate future. Interesting perspective. See, from my point of view, my sister was doing her job as a nurse, which is to make sure patients get appropriate care. The people who try to kill her for doing that job are the ones asking the wrong kinds of questions. The younger man spoke for the first time. Your sister needs to understand that some situations are better left alone. And you need to understand that my sister is under my protection now, which means anyone who threatens her is threatening me. And threatening me is a mistake you really don't want to make. The older man studied Marcus with the calculating look of someone evaluating a potential opponent. Mr. Rodriguez, you're a former military man. You understand how these things work. Sometimes people get involved in situations that are bigger than they realize. Sometimes the smart move is to walk away before things get complicated. Marcus took a step closer, his hands still relaxed and visible, but his body language shifting into something more predatory. Here's what I understand. You work for people who think they can solve their problems by hurting innocent people. You probably think I'm just another civilian who can be intimidated or eliminated. But here's what you don't understand. Marcus took another step closer. I spent 8 years in the Navy SEALs. I've been in situations you can't imagine, against people who make your employers look like amateur hour. I've hunted terrorists in mountains and deserts and cities, and I've never failed to complete a mission that mattered to me. The two men exchanged glances, clearly recalibrating their assessment of the situation. Marcus continued in the same conversational tone. My sister matters to me more than anything else in the world, which means protecting her isn't just a mission, it's the mission. And the thing about SEALs is we don't leave our people behind, and we don't forget when someone hurts our family. The older man's hand moved slightly toward his concealed weapon. Marcus noticed the movement, but didn't react. So here's what's going to happen. Marcus continued. You're going to get back in your vehicle and drive away. You're going to tell your employers that Elena Rodriguez is no longer available for threats or intimidation. And you're going to find new employment because the people you work for are going to have much bigger problems to worry about very soon. The younger man started to respond, but the older man held up a hand to stop him. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. This doesn't end here, Mr. Rodriguez. Marcus smiled again, and this time there was nothing friendly about it. You're absolutely right. It doesn't end until everyone responsible for what happened to my sister is in prison or permanently out of the intimidation business. But it ends with justice being served, not with more violence against innocent people. The two men backed toward their vehicle, maintaining eye contact with Marcus until they reached the SUV. As they drove away, Marcus memorized their license plate number and noted the direction they traveled. When he returned to the rental car, Elena was pale but determined. Marcus, what just happened? I sent a message. These people have been operating under the assumption that they can hurt whoever they want without consequences. I wanted them to understand that assumption is no longer valid. Elena was quiet as they drove to the resort where they'd be staying. Finally, she spoke. This is going to get worse before it gets better, isn't it? Marcus nodded. Probably. But, Elena, here's what I need you to understand. These people made this personal when they put their hands on you. I'm going to make sure they understand the consequences of that decision. What are you planning to do? Marcus pulled into the resort parking lot and looked at his sister with the expression of absolute certainty she'd seen on his face since childhood when he'd made up his mind about something important. I'm going to find everyone involved in this conspiracy. I'm going to gather enough evidence to put them all in prison. And I'm going to make sure they never have the opportunity to hurt anyone the way they hurt you. Ow! Marcus smiled with grim satisfaction by reminding them exactly who they decided to mess with. As they checked into the resort, Marcus was already planning his next moves. The confrontation in the parking lot had been necessary to establish boundaries and gather intelligence about his opponents. But it had also escalated the situation from surveillance to direct confrontation. The people behind this conspiracy now knew they were dealing with someone who wouldn't be intimidated or easily eliminated. That would make them more dangerous in the short term, but it would also force them to make decisions quickly, and quick decisions often led to mistakes. Marcus had spent years learning to exploit enemy mistakes. Now he would teach Phoenix Healthcare Solutions and their criminal associates what Navy SEALs did to people who threatened their families. The breaking point came at 2:17 a.m. on Marcus's 5th day in Phoenix, when someone tried to break into Elena's hospital room. Marcus had been conducting overnight surveillance at Phoenix Healthcare Solutions, using the cover of darkness to get closer to the building and gather more detailed intelligence about their operations. The surveillance devices he'd planted were providing regular updates about activity inside the facility, and what he'd learned over the past 48 hours confirmed that the medical fraud operation was just one piece of a much larger criminal enterprise. But While Marcus was focused on gathering intelligence about the conspirators were planning their next move against Elena. Marcus received the emergency call from resort security at 2:20 a.m. Elena had activated the panic alarm in their suite after someone attempted to enter through the balcony door. Resort security had responded immediately and found evidence of forced entry, but the intruder had fled when the alarm sounded. Marcus arrived at the resort 15 minutes later to find Elena sitting in the security office, wrapped in a robe and trembling with adrenaline rather than fear. The Elena he found was not the broken, frightened woman he'd rescued from the hospital. This was the sister he remembered from childhood, angry, determined, and ready to fight back. They came through the balcony, Elena told him, her voice steady despite what had happened. Third floor, Marcus. Someone climbed 3 stories or rappelled down from the roof just to get into our room. Marcus examined the balcony door while resort security called the police. The lock had been defeated using professional techniques, not the crude methods of ordinary burglars. This was the work of someone with specialized training in breaking and entering. Did you see anything? Marcus asked, a shadow moving past the window. I was awake, couldn't sleep, so I was reading in the living room. When I saw movement on the balcony, I hit the panic button you gave me and grabbed the pepper spray. Marcus felt a cold fury building in his chest. These people had escalated from surveillance to direct action, attempting to break into a secure resort to reach Elena. This wasn't about intimidation anymore. This was attempted murder. The police response was swift and professional. Detective Morrison and Officer Chun arrived within 30 minutes, along with 2 other investigators who specialize in breaking and entering cases. They processed the crime scene thoroughly, collecting fingerprints and fiber evidence from the balcony. But Marcus knew the physical evidence wouldn't lead anywhere. The people behind this attempt were too professional to leave traces that could be traced back to them. The real value of this incident was what it revealed about their desperation and their capabilities. Mr. Rodriguez, Detective Morrison said after completing his examination of the crime scene, this level of sophistication suggests we're dealing with people who have resources and training beyond what we initially thought. I've been telling you that, Marcus replied. This isn't just hospital corruption. This is organized crime with connections to professional security operatives. Officer Chun joined the conversation. We've been investigating the connections between Phoenix Healthcare Solutions and Desert Protection Services. You're right about the sophistication. These people have military and intelligence backgrounds. Marcus had been expecting this conversation. Detective, I think it's time to bring in federal authorities. This conspiracy involves medical fraud, money laundering, attempted murder, and now breaking and entering at a secured facility. Local law enforcement doesn't have the resources to handle something this complex. We've already been in contact with the FBI field office, Morrison admitted. They're sending a team tomorrow to review the evidence and determine if federal charges are appropriate. Marcus nodded. Good. But in the meantime, Elena needs better protection than resort security can provide. After the police finished their investigation and left, Marcus and Elena sat in the resort's lobby discussing their next moves. It was nearly 4 a.m., and the resort was empty except for security guards and maintenance staff. Marcus, I want to be involved in whatever comes next, Elena said. These people have tried to kill me twice now. I'm not going to hide in safe houses while other people fight my battles. Elena, these aren't ordinary criminals. They have training and resources that make them extremely dangerous. And you have training and resources that make you extremely dangerous too. But, Marcus, this isn't just about protecting me anymore. If this criminal conspiracy involves multiple hospitals and medical facilities, how many other patients are being hurt? How many other nurses and doctors are being threatened for trying to do the right thing? Marcus studied his sister's expression and recognized the determination that had driven her to become a nurse, driven her to document the medical fraud despite the personal risk, driven her to keep fighting even after nearly being murdered. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we don't wait for federal authorities to slowly build a case while these people continue hurting patients and threatening anyone who tries to stop them. I'm suggesting we take more direct action. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Elena was right about the broader implications of the conspiracy, but direct action carried risks that could get both of them killed. Elena, if we move against these people directly, there's no guarantee we'll survive. These aren't street criminals. They're organized, well-funded, and completely willing to commit murder. Marcus, look at me, Elena said, her voice carrying the authority she developed during years of dealing with medical emergencies. I've already survived 2 murder attempts. I've already lost my job and my sense of safety. What I haven't lost is my commitment to protecting patients and stopping these people from continuing to hurt innocent people. Marcus realized his sister had changed during the past 5 days. The trauma of the attacks had not broken her. It had forged her into someone harder, more focused, more dangerous in her own way. All right, Marcus said finally. But we do this methodically, using intelligence and planning rather than emotion and anger. And we coordinate with law enforcement rather than operating independently. Elena smiled for the first time since the attack. Deal. So what's our next move? Marcus pulled out his laptop and opened the files he'd been compiling on the conspiracy. We have evidence of medical fraud, attempted murder, and breaking and entering. But what we don't have is direct evidence linking Phoenix Healthcare Solutions to the larger criminal organization that's funding this operation. How do we get that evidence? By forcing them to reveal their connections. Right now, they think they're dealing with a local problem that can be solved through intimidation and violence. We need to make them realize they're facing a threat that requires them to call for help from their larger organization. Marcus showed Elena the financial analysis Jake Morrison had provided, tracing money flows from Phoenix Healthcare Solutions through various shell companies to accounts in Nevada, California, and Mexico. This network involves millions of dollars and criminal operations across multiple states. Phoenix Healthcare Solutions is just one node in a larger system. If we can force them to reach out to their handlers for help, we can identify the rest of the network. How do we force them to do that? Marcus smiled with the same expression Elena remembered from childhood when he developed a particularly clever plan for dealing with neighborhood bullies. By making their Phoenix operation too expensive to maintain. Right now, they think they can solve their problems by eliminating us. We're going to make them realize that eliminating us will only create bigger problems. Over the next 4 hours, Marcus and Elena developed a comprehensive plan to expose the entire criminal network. The plan involved 3 phases: disruption of current operations, documentation of criminal activity, and coordination with federal authorities to ensure prosecutions that would dismantle the organization. Phase 1 would begin immediately. Marcus had identified several vulnerabilities in Phoenix Healthcare Solutions operations, including their reliance on specific transportation routes for moving money and merchandise, their predictable schedule of meetings and deliveries, and their assumption that they could operate in Phoenix without attracting federal attention. Elena's role would be crucial to the plan's success. As a medical professional, she could interpret the evidence they'd gathered and help federal investigators understand the scope of patient harm caused by the conspiracy. More importantly, her willingness to testify about what she'd witnessed would provide the human element that prosecutors needed to build compelling cases. But the most important element of their plan was timing. Marcus had learned from his surveillance that Phoenix Healthcare Solutions was planning a major operation within the next 48 hours. Based on intercepted communications from his surveillance devices, the conspiracy was preparing to move a large amount of money and merchandise, possibly in preparation for shutting down their Phoenix operations and relocating. They know law enforcement is getting close. Marcus explained to Elena as dawn broke over the Phoenix desert. They're planning to cut their losses and disappear before they can be arrested. So we have 2 days to stop them? We have 2 days to gather enough evidence to ensure that when they try to disappear, federal authorities will be waiting for them. Marcus's phone rang with a call from Captain Bradley, his former commanding officer. Bradley had been working his contacts in federal law enforcement and had news about the FBI's interest in the Phoenix Healthcare Solutions investigation. Marcus, I got good news and bad news, Bradley said. The good news is that the FBI is very interested in your case. The bad news is that Phoenix Healthcare Solutions is connected to a criminal organization that's been under federal investigation for over a year. What kind of criminal organization? Money laundering for drug cartels, human trafficking, and medical fraud across multiple states. The Phoenix operation is just one piece of a network that involves dozens of businesses and hundreds of people. Marcus felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with discovering the true scope of an enemy organization. Captain, how much does the FBI know about the network? Enough to know it's bigger than anyone initially realized, but not enough to make arrests without risking the larger investigation. Marcus, they want to meet with you and Elena to discuss cooperation. When? This afternoon. Special Agent Sarah Williams from the Phoenix Field Office. She's the lead investigator on the multi-state task force that's been tracking this organization. Marcus looked at Elena, who had been listening to the conversation. She nodded firmly. Tell Agent Williams we'll meet with her, Marcus said. But, Captain, I need you to understand something. Elena and I aren't going to sit in protective custody while these people continue operating. We're going to take direct action to stop them. Marcus, be very careful. Federal investigations move slowly for good reasons. Don't compromise their larger case by acting precipitously. After ending the call, Marcus and Elena spent the morning reviewing their evidence and preparing for the FBI meeting. Elena organized her documentation of the medical fraud, while Marcus compiled his intelligence on the security operations and financial networks. But while they were preparing to cooperate with federal authorities, Marcus was also finalizing plans for more immediate action. He'd identified a critical vulnerability in Phoenix Healthcare Solutions operations that would allow him to gather intelligence about their larger network, while simultaneously disrupting their ability to continue harming patients. Tonight, while Elena met with FBI agents to provide testimony about the medical fraud, Marcus would conduct a direct action mission against Phoenix Healthcare Solutions' main facility. He would gather the evidence that federal investigators needed while sending a message that the people responsible for attacking Elena were no longer safe in their assumptions about operating without consequences. Marcus had spent years conducting operations against enemies who thought they were untouchable. Tonight, he would remind Phoenix Healthcare Solutions and their criminal associates what happened when they made the mistake of threatening a Navy SEAL's family. Elena, meanwhile, was preparing for her own mission. She would provide federal investigators with the detailed medical evidence they needed to understand the scope of patient harm caused by the conspiracy. But, more than that, she would serve as the public face of resistance to the criminal organization, demonstrating that their attempts to silence witnesses through violence had only strengthened the resolve of those committed to stopping them. As the sun set over Phoenix on Marcus's 5th day in the city, brother and sister prepared for the operations that would either expose the entire criminal network or get them both killed in the attempt. The people who had tried to murder Elena Rodriguez were about to learn that their actions had consequences they couldn't have imagined. The final confrontation began at 11:47 p.m. when Marcus breached the Phoenix Healthcare Solutions facility, but it ended 3 hours later in a way that no one could have predicted. Marcus had spent the afternoon with Elena meeting FBI Special Agent Sarah Williams, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who had been tracking the criminal organization for 18 months. Williams confirmed what Captain Bradley had told them. Phoenix Healthcare Solutions was connected to a network that included drug money laundering, human trafficking, and medical fraud operations across 6 states. The network is run by a man named Viktor Kozlov, Williams explained during their meeting at the FBI field office. Russian immigrant who's built a sophisticated criminal enterprise using legitimate businesses as fronts. Phoenix Healthcare Solutions is just one of dozens of companies he controls. Elena provided Williams with her detailed documentation of the medical fraud, explaining how patients were being subjected to unnecessary procedures and how medications were being diverted for illegal sale. Williams listened with growing alarm as Elena described the scope of the operation. Ms. Rodriguez, your evidence suggests they've been harming hundreds of patients over the past 2 years. This isn't just financial fraud. This is assault, maybe manslaughter in cases where patients died from unnecessary procedures. Marcus contributed his intelligence about the security operations and financial networks, sharing the surveillance information he'd gathered over the past week. Williams was impressed by the quality of his intelligence, but concerned about his methods. Mr. Rodriguez, some of what you've gathered could be inadmissible in court because of how you obtained it. We need to be careful about building a case that will actually result in convictions. Agent Williams, Marcus replied, I understand your concerns about legal procedure, but these people tried to murder my sister twice. They're planning to relocate their operations and disappear within the next 48 hours. If we don't act immediately, they'll escape justice and continue harming people in whatever city they move to. Williams was quiet for a long moment. What are you suggesting? Marcus looked at Elena, then back at Williams. I'm suggesting we force them to reveal the connections to their larger network tonight, while they're still in Phoenix and while we still have the opportunity to gather evidence. How? By making their Phoenix operation too expensive to maintain. Right now, Kozlov's people think they're dealing with a local problem. If I can force them to call for help from their larger organization, you'll have the evidence you need to identify and arrest the entire network. Williams frowned. Mr. Rodriguez, what you're describing sounds like vigilante action. The FBI can't officially sanction. You're not sanctioning anything, Marcus interrupted. You're investigating a criminal conspiracy, and I'm a civilian who's providing intelligence and evidence. What I do with my own time and resources is my business. Elena leaned forward. Agent Williams, how long will it take to build a federal case against this network using traditional investigative methods? Realistically, 18 months, maybe 2 years. These people are sophisticated, and they have good lawyers. And how many patients will be harmed during those 18 months? Elena asked. Williams didn't answer, but her expression showed she understood the dilemma. After leaving the FBI meeting, Marcus and Elena returned to the resort to finalize their plans. Elena would remain at the resort with FBI protection while Marcus conducted his operation against Phoenix Healthcare Solutions. If everything went according to plan, Marcus would gather enough evidence to force the criminal organization to reveal its larger structure, providing Williams with the intelligence she needed for immediate arrests. But as Marcus prepared for the operation, he received unexpected intelligence that changed everything. Jake Morrison called with urgent information about Viktor Kozlov and his criminal network. Marcus, I've been digging deeper into this organization, and there's something you need to know. Kozlov isn't just running medical fraud and money laundering. His network includes human trafficking operations that are connected to missing persons cases across the Southwest. Marcus felt ice forming in his stomach. What kind of missing persons? Young women, mostly immigrants who disappear from hospitals and medical facilities. The FBI has been tracking a pattern, but they haven't been able to prove the connections. Marcus, I think Phoenix Healthcare Solutions isn't just a front for medical fraud. It's a staging area for human trafficking operations. This information changed the tactical situation completely. If Kozlov's network was involved in human trafficking, then the Phoenix Healthcare Solutions facility might contain evidence of crimes far worse than medical fraud. It might also contain victims who needed immediate rescue. Marcus made a decision that violated every principle of tactical planning he'd learned during his military career. Instead of conducting a careful reconnaissance and evidence-gathering operation, he called Agent Williams and proposed a joint federal-civilian operation to raid the Phoenix Healthcare Solutions facility immediately. Agent Williams, I have intelligence that suggests Phoenix Healthcare Solutions may be involved in human trafficking as well as medical fraud. If there are victims being held at that facility, we need to act tonight. Williams was skeptical. Mr. Rodriguez, we can't authorize a raid based on uncorroborated intelligence. We need warrants, coordination with local law enforcement. Agent Williams, my sister was almost murdered by these people. If they're trafficking human beings, how many other women are in immediate danger while we debate proper procedure? Elena, who had been listening to the conversation, took the phone from Marcus. Agent Williams, this is Elena Rodriguez. As a medical professional and a victim of this criminal organization, I'm formally requesting federal protection and assistance for any victims who may be held at Phoenix Healthcare Solutions. And I'm volunteering to accompany any rescue operation to provide medical assistance to trafficking victims. There was a long pause before Williams responded. Ms. Rodriguez, what you're proposing is extremely dangerous and potentially illegal. I can't authorize civilian participation in a federal operation. Elena looked at Marcus with the expression he'd seen throughout their childhood when she decided to do something regardless of the consequences. Agent Williams, I'm not asking for authorization. I'm informing you that my brother and I are going to conduct our own investigation of Phoenix Healthcare Solutions tonight. If you want to coordinate with us, that's your choice. The call ended with Williams promising to consider options, while Elena and Marcus finalized their plans for immediate action. At 11:30 p.m., Marcus approached the Phoenix Healthcare Solutions facility using techniques he'd learned during years.